goes. A good day, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 221. I'm going to start us off with a tune, as I do on most occasions.
Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed. Go bind your sons to exile, to serve your captives' need. To wait in heavy harness on flooded folk and wild. Your new gods sullen peoples have devil and have child. Take up the white man's burden, in patience to abide, to veil the threat of terror and check the show of pride. By open speech and simple, 100 times made plain, to seek another's profit and work another's gain. Take up the white man's burden, the savage wars of peace. Fill full the mouth of famine and bid the sickness cease. And when your goal is nearest, the end for others sought, what's love that heed and folly? Bring all your hopes to naught. Take up the white man's burden, no tawdry rule of kings, but toil of serf and sweeper, the tale of common things. The ports ye shall not enter, the roads ye shall not tread. Go make them with your living and mark them with your dead. Take up the white man's burden and reap his old reward. The blame of those ye better, the hate of those ye guard. The cry of those ye humor are slowly towards the light. Why brought ye us from bondage, a loved Egyptian night? Take up the white man's burden, ye dare not stoop to less, nor call too loud on freedom to cloak your weariness. By all ye cry or whisper, by all ye leave or do, the silent, sullen people shall weigh your gods and you. Take up the white man's burden, have done with childish days, the lightly proffered laurel, the easy ungrudged praise. Come down to search your manhood through all of thankless years. No age with give or wisdom, the judgment of your peers. Take off the white man's burden through all of thankless years.
That was, of course, the excellent Chris Gard. Do go and check out his excellent YouTube channel. Looks like we've got a fairly full house this evening, gents. How is everyone doing this evening?
Same old, same old.
Yeah, I'm doing
As
good
always.
too.
I think we should have a fairly interesting stream this evening. This is actually the fourth stream I've done this week. I was on Tim Wilm's Unshackled stream a bit earlier today for the Australian federal election. And Aaron kindly asked me on his stream yesterday, I think it was, for the English local elections, which obviously we're going to talk a bit about this evening. But as always, I'm going to start us off by asking people if they have the first subject for this evening, and I'm simply going to go clockwise. So, Aaron, did you have a first subject?
Yes, this is not something that's necessarily been in the news this week, but it is something I think we need to start talking about, which is that there's this idea that's going on the right among some people that we have sort of supposedly permanent alliances with people, particularly I'm thinking the Irish nationalists who are anti-immigration in the Republic of Ireland. And to me, it's foolish. Whilst it's understandable and quite right that we sort of share our sympathies with the average Irish people dealing with this massive invasion of migrants, the Irish nationalists who are leading those protests are, when it comes to Northern Ireland, absolutely no different from traditional Republicans, and they are firmly in favour of a united Ireland. And you saw that when Homeland tried to establish themselves in Northern Ireland, the National Party, which is a right-wing nationalist group in the Republic, went absolutely ballistic and started complaining about it. And we've got to understand that these people, our alliance with them is really temporary. And when it comes down to our national interest, they are not our allies, they are not our brothers, and we need to, frankly, put away the nonsense that they are. And we need to particularly put away this idea of not bringing division between us. Sorry, we are divided on the issue. No amount of soft soap will change that, and we need to be realistic about it. And I can see the gentleman in the chat, incognito, saying white people first, then we can worry about sectarianism. No, it's British people first. Everybody else can, frankly, fuck off. My British national interest aligns no more with a white person in Ireland than it does with a white person in Poland. This pan-white nonsense, which is really what stems this sort of foolish idea that we are brothers with the nationalists in south of Ireland, needs to be dropped. We need to get rid of it and get serious. It's utter crap, and we need to really start getting our arse in gear and watching what's going on properly, and not within a sort of fool's paradise that these people are all our brothers in arms.
You used to see this with the like the Eternal Anglo meme. I know we've talked about this on the stream before, but like you'd see this sort of frothing at the mouth, sort of anti-English sentiment, sort of on the peripheries of groups that were otherwise claiming to be just purely sort of pro-white identitarian and nothing else.
Yeah.
It was always, it's kind of a hard thing to square, because it's even like you say, just English first. I mean, the funny thing is you can have an easier conversation with, let's say, a German nationalist or an Italian nationalist than you can with like an Irish nationalist, and even to some extent like a Polish nationalist, because of course, the Polish diaspora wasn't wholly innocent when that was a large immigration wave coming into the UK. So you end up with all sorts of weird dynamics that it's probably better off just stepping over.
I mean, the trouble with Irish nationalism, in as we understand it today, is it is just a set of ideas that was formed in the United States and then exported back to Ireland. If you look at, say, poets like Yeats and people like that, they had a very different concept of Irish nationalism, and before that, before the Irish Brotherhood, it was radically different from what we understand today. I mean, I think a lot of it, you look at like those groups like Kneecap and that band Kneecap that's been you've seen in the news and everything. I mean, completely AstroTurf. The whole story's been AstroTurfed as like a non-issue, but it does actually highlight just the average mindset. Now, I mean, a lot of our Irish friends are not happy with the radical change in Ireland that we have seen today in the Irish Republic, but at the same time, um, there is a point that Aaron is right. These people didn't really. I mean, it's not like they didn't care when the radical change happened decades earlier in the United Kingdom, and of course, why would they? And this is where it comes down to, and I remember sort of making this point when you had those Tommy Robinson demos in London, and you had Iranian monarchist exiles, you had Jewish Israeli Zionist types, you had you know generation identity from Austria and place like that, and I remember I can't remember who it was. It may have been it may have been Carl Benjamin actually, but I don't quote me on this. But I remember when someone was confronted them on this issue of um, where's the British flags? Basically, because it was like all these other flags but British flags, and it's like the response was, well, this is the internationalist nationalist meetup or something like that.
Oh, Maya 2C said that.
Oh,
Wow.
my 2C said that. Yeah, it was like an internationalist nationalist meetup, which is a complete perversion of all things. Because you're not. It's not about Britain in the end. It's just about like this loose collection of people who are unhappy with the current system. And I would also say the latest example of this is, of course, what's happening in Canada, in elections in Canada. Um, effectively Trump's actions, and I guess if I was a Canadian um, on the right traditionalist side, I would be pretty. I mean, the Conservatives themselves were useless anyway to begin with, and it was a poor situation. But um, Trump basically allowed, or threw a bone to the Liberal Party in Canada to adopt a more
Um,
anti-American nationalistic sort of dialogue and talking points.
AI, could I
Because,
just
but hold on, I know you're going to say, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say they're not nationalistic, they're
No,
left.
no, I'm not actually. I'm going to say that because I want to talk a little bit about the Australian elections later on. We're
Oh
going
yeah.
to talk about this Trump effect then. That's all I wanted to say.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah. And so you got the Trump effect, where many people in our circles, and I will admit that right back along, I was one of them. I was sort of thinking to myself that Trump, it would be a positive impact, but the reality is even America and their inward position now is causing negative effects because it's emboldened the liberal governments in power, because now it's sort of it's now like a um America versus Europe, Canada versus America, and it's given that sort of political energy back to our opponents by Trump, who we consider an ally. And so I think what Aaron Hook is getting at is, I mean, yeah, we can't. I understand when people say white European, and I, that I am all for beating a drum for European civilization, and I think it's a good thing because I do think it for as the English people and for other European people, it is important. But at the end of the day, um, people will act within their own self groups, and it isn't selfishness. This is just how natural groups of ethnic groups work, and we see it on a smaller scale with foreign groups in our countries, in the UK and in Australia. We see smaller alien groups how they operate in their own ethnic interest, and I do think people, especially younger people, are more waking up to that fact. But um, if you want to take a shot at populism itself, this this is one of the reasons I believe the Conservatives in Canada and co probably failed is because they allowed the sort of nationalist element to swing back into the favour of the Liberals.
Mitch, what's your thoughts on this subject?
I was like, what was I say? So I know there's like there's this one argument I see circulated around by sort of Gaelic Twitter as well as some people over here who are sympathetic towards. They go, oh well, because we don't like being a minority in London, we should sympathise with the Irish who were made a minority in Ulster because of course Ulster was one of the most Gaelic parts of the British Isles, and then we came in and settled some of our people. Now I just take the position of, well, look, that was good for our in group. I don't really see the Irish so much as my in group because that's what they define themselves as, like an out group compared to us Brits. And also, that was just the way things were back then. Like, if you lost, there was no medal for second place. You were subject to the conditions of a victor. You know, like, no, for example, Tunisians to this day don't cry about what Rome did to Carthage. So I don't see why there are people on our side who will cry foul bloody murder over what happened between from James I onward regarding Ulster plantations. And then they're saying, oh, well, because we did for Ulster plantations, we should give back Ulster to the Irish because we must hold on to this universal principle of opposing demographic replacement. Whereas I'm of a position of going, well, I'm only in. The main reason I'm a nationalist because I'm for whatever's in my in-group interest. Like I don't, like for example, yeah, I wouldn't like, for example, the Irish did disappear. That being said, it's not my fight. It's up to them to save their own country, and I'm not going to. I wouldn't be okay with compromising the union for the sake of appeasing Irish nationalism, especially when you factor that a lot of Irish nationalism has been co-opted by Sinn Féin and all those types who just hate us.
Yeah, look, I just to give my own views on this briefly. First of all, I think a lot of alliances on the right are temporary. Look at the alliance between the right and the TERFs. That's strictly on one issue. It's not something that's generally true. Most of the TERFs detest the right in every other respect. Obviously, I'm going to support Irish people when they are protesting against mass immigration in Ireland. But that doesn't mean I would be prepared to give up Northern Ireland. I do think there are a certain number of little Englanders in the British right-wing scene who would be happy to lose Ulster and be happy to lose Scotland and even be happy to lose Wales. I think there are a certain number of those people. I don't know how many there are. I think it's very much a minority, but there are people like that. And I don't agree with them at all. I mean, any more than, as I think Aaron was saying before we went live, that, I'm not going to give up Gibraltar because the Spanish wanted to have a right-wing party. It's just not going to happen, So, yeah, my opinion is if somewhere's British, it stays British. And I'm very much against giving up any British territory. I was and am against giving up the Chagos Islands in the Indian Ocean. If it's British, it should stay British. That's my view. But I'll cooperate with anti-immigration people in Ireland so long as that's all they're talking about. As soon as if they want to start talking about, oh no, we want to take back Ulster, then I'm sorry, my agreement with them will come to a very abrupt end.
Yeah, I would to answer Martin Lederman over in chat. I mean, European civilization, including America, now that's still a bit of a jury to decide in terms of the fact that, well, a few months back, the Americans just declassified all the USA stuff. So a lot of the DEI stuff and all the cultural liberalism that got exported to places like Germany after the Second World War. Yeah, it was down to America. Like, for example, I imagine I'll mention this later regarding AFD being flagged up as quote-unquote right-wing extremists, but like a lot of the cultural liberalism that affects us on this side of the Atlantic was exported to us by the Americans.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's one of those things where for Europe to survive, we have to de-dollarize. We can't be subject to the Americans because they'll just give us crumbs at best. Like I take the same view as Enoch Powell, that, I mean, America's not our friend, and this is why, not just England, but also
equally, Mitch, if you had, let's say, Le Pen won in France and the AfD won in Germany, and Wilders is the leader of the Netherlands, and whoever in Italy or what have you, that will not get rid of national interests. And Britain has somehow a proper right-wing government that is against immigration. That's not going to create European unity. I mean, because nations still have national interests, and they always will have.
Well, I mean, I think like it would actually, in many ways, it could actually, it could actually be like for the regime if the AfD say were to win in Germany, or Le Pen win in France, or Wilders or in the Netherlands, it might actually have. I mean, I think some would consider that to be, well, that would be an easy way to contain the energy, but actually I think it might have the reverse effect, because if you look at the AfD, its leadership is a lesbian with a Sri Lankan partner. If you look at Wilders, he worships Israel and the Jews. If you look at Le Pen, well, she views the AfD as too far right. So if they were to be put in place, I would think, number one, I think that they wouldn't, I don't think they would be vanguardistic in their own group completely. I don't, maybe on like the local level, like in Germany, some of the state branches of the AfD they're more nationalistic than the the main party leadership, let's say. And probably the same is true for Le Pen's Front National, or whatever they're calling themselves nowadays. But I don't see it being like if the regime was to throw a bone to them and give them a chance in power, I don't think anything would. I think it would get worse for the regime. That is, I think people would be more nationalistic. It would just, because effectively people would see beyond the containment. They would not be satisfied with the containment that is afforded them. And I think it's the same problem that we've had with reform, in the last several months, and the behaviour of Farage and people in reform. There hasn't been really any sort of genuine excitement or energy behind it. It's just been bickering. And the same has happened to the Homeland Party. I am told in recent weeks, there's been problems there. They sort of rolled back their hardline stance on certain things to sort of, what was it, the magical center or something like that, to find the magical center.
Yeah, fair enough. Aaron, it's your topic. What are your kind of wrap up thoughts on it?
Yeah, I'll just say that one thing I will mention, which I'm not sure how well this is known. Everybody has probably heard that there's a left wing and centrist rhetoric that the anti-migration protests in Ireland are sort of British backed and British agents operating there. What is also said by the anti-migration activists in Ireland is that the government and the people who are opposing the protests are British agents. The whole thing on both sides is they think we're pulling the fucking strings, and we're not.
It's crazy, yeah. It's crazy. Yeah. But you can see that where this comes from is that Sinn Féin, which is the political wing of the Provisional IRA, of course, and Marxist, basically. Sinn Féin want Brits out, 50 billion Somalians in. So, that's where that comes from.
Yeah. I just want to respond to something that Martin Lederman said. He said that he regards sort of Northern Ireland as extremely outdated given the current situation for all us whites in general. No, it's not. Since the 1880s, it has been accepted by British nationalists that Ulster is central to the British nation. That is why, for the better part of damn near 40 years, people like Joseph Chamberlain, Lord Salisbury, Andrew Bonar Law were so adamantly opposed to Irish Home Rule, and why people like Enoch Powell went on after losing his seat in 1974 at Wolverhampton Southwest, went on and became an Ulster Unionist MP. Ulster is an integral part of the British nation. It is not outdated.
Oh, look, I totally agree with you, Aaron, as I said. And also, I'm quite unhappy with the fact that the British government, under the so-called Conservatives, of course, as part of the Brexit agreement, allowed Northern Ireland to be treated differently to the rest of the nation.
Yeah. Disgraceful.
So yeah, I think you're right about this. I think I mean, you know, I don't want to chuck the baby out with the bathwater. As I say, I am very happy for Irish people to protest against mass immigration into Ireland, and I'll support them in that. But if they then start to switch to the idea of, oh no, but we want Ulster, then no, I'm sorry, that cooperation must stop.
Yeah, it's like I imagine Aaron Hook is very familiar with Oswald Mosley as I am. So like, because the thing about Mosley was he was a lot more, I suppose you could say, Gaelic-philic. Like, he was quite sympathetic towards the Irish, because he said, well, the thing was, plenty of those Irishmen who fought against us in their War of Independence fought in the trenches for us, and he saw that as a pity. However, it's also a matter of, well, I don't know, like, I don't know what Aaron would say, but like, I'd say, like, Mosley's position on Northern Ireland, as well as the Republic of Ireland altogether, I just think, yeah, it's a bit iffy, to say the least. I don't think he should have been a lot more robustly unionist, along the same lines as Enoch Powell and Edward Carson, that kind of tradition. Whereas Mosley later on just became like a massive European federalist type which is not very contrary to our tradition. I mean, I used to have my sympathies towards that way, like a long way back, but nowadays I've gone off Mosley.
I think it's difficult to be a nationalist and to be also a pan-Europeanist at the same time. Like, I'm no fan of the European Union at all, and I don't really want to replace it with anything either. I think European nations would be better off running their own ships.
I think it's a, like. Sorry, Mitch, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I can understand a pan-Europeanism in reference to, like, individual countries are weak by themselves. Like Germany, for example, couldn't really do much by itself. Whereas, let's say, Europe was united as a bloc. Now, I think pan-Europeanism is as stupid as, the idea of the Austro-Hungarian Empire somehow existing long term. But it's one of those things where it's kind of like Europe's not in the best of positions, because on one end we've got the Russians to deal with, and then we've got the Americans and the Chinese. So I can understand to some extent why pan-Europeanism is entertained.
Yeah, I can understand it. But if Germany, for example, was to spend enough on defense, they'd be a pretty powerful nation still. They still have a pretty big population. Like all European nations, although Germany is much better off than Britain in this regard, it doesn't have as much industry as it should have these days. But I mean, that to me is something that all European nations are going to have to build up again somehow or another.
Yeah,
carry on, Aaron.
I'm just going to mention Mosley. Mosley is a man who nobody in the British right should take seriously. His defenders tend to suggest that, his pan-Europeanism was the product of the post-war period. No, it wasn't. He was speaking of a union of European peoples back in the 30s during, I think the earliest reference he makes to that is 1936, and his best man at his wedding to Diana Mosley, his wife, second wife, he was writing in the BUF's newspaper about effectively a European Union, in a proper sense of that word of what we have today. So Mosley was committed to this, and he referred to it in the 30s as the spirit of 1918. Mosley was a committed pan-Europeanist from pretty much the 30s onwards. And when it comes to Northern Ireland, as much as mentioned, he was more than willing to give Northern Ireland over to the Republic, or the Free State as it was then, in some kind of traitorous sense of giving them some sop to them. He was, and that was something he developed by the time the BUF is formed. The BUF in Northern Ireland was committed, called the Ulster Fascists, were committed to a united Ireland. It's just nobody who thinks of themselves as a British nationalist should take that man seriously. And also on top of that, he wanted to radically change the British Constitution in a manner we wouldn't see until 1997 with New Labour. I mean, he is not in any way a man that anybody who sees themselves as a British nationalist should admire or want to follow. And I should point out to Gerald of Rivia, Mosley's version of the EU would have seen the continuation of colonial rule in Africa, and that would eventually have seen, because of the nature, sort of the idiotic nature of the people who Mosley was with, eventually a liberal takeover of it, and then you would have seen the importation of unlimited Africans to Europe. Pan-Europeanism is not a solution to anything other than helping liberals get what they want.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, Aaron. Adam and anybody else, any final thoughts on this before we move on to something else?
I do think from sort of the bottom up perspective on this sort of thing, you see this kind of goes into Al's point earlier about like Israel flags at Tommy rallies. You kind of, when you other it into this sort of external conflict, you're kind of giving a lot of people a free pass to avoid sort of the harder issues. So they don't have to like stand by their people or fly a flag. They can go to the other. And you kind of see this in the reverse with what people used to call like the Irish question, right? In these circles where they kind of don't have to sit there and talk about third world migrant groups. They can actually just talk about this historical claim against the British. And it's a hard thing to go against, because when years ago I used to be a bit more on the whole sort of like Anglo-centric side, and I used to sometimes sit there and think to myself, is this just kind of a LARP because I kind of want to get away from talk about the hard issues of race? And I mean, as it turns out, I'm a racist, so no, not really. But the issue is, of course, is that a lot of people do use it as an out. So it allows people who are trying to, let's say, run containment strategies and all sorts to sort of prey on that. And I don't know how you get around that.
Yeah, look, it's certainly not an easy issue, and it is going to cause problems. But I mean, basically, I'm on Aaron's side of this argument. I think that we can wish the people in Ireland who want to stop mass immigration well and support them in those efforts. But as I say, if they then want to move on to saying, "Oh, I'm Brits out of Ulster," then I'm sorry, I'm just going to say no.
I mean,
because the people in Ulster are our people, so
I mean, I saw on Facebook from a few former university friends, because a couple of them are quite left wing, and they've been sharing a BBC documentary of that Louis Theroux character, where he went to Israel and to the Palestinian territories and interviewed people on there. And he interviewed they have like this it's called the settlement sort of group where it's basically Israeli settlements in say like the West Bank or somewhere like that.
Mhm.
And they was interviewing. I saw this clip that was being shared, and it was interviewing this this woman who is this sort of older matriarch sort of figure who's like behind a lot of these settlements they were springing up in the West Bank. And what was quite funny is she was like, well, what we're going to do is we're just going to kick all the Arabs out. We're just going to expel all the Arabs, and because and so many people, particularly on the Sivnat sort of right and the right in this country, are all very pro-Israel, and on the surface level, you can understand it in the sense of, oh yeah, they're against Islam, they're against this. But then it's like she said, we're going to kick out the Arabs, all these 3 million Arabs, and they can go to England. She just said, well, they can go to England, or they can go to France, or they can go to wherever. And even people in other, and I think this gets to the heart of it, is what we're saying is, a nationalist cause in one country usually has either no effect or actually could have a complete negative effect in your country. Because I don't doubt that they would be more than content to send millions of Palestinians, if they could, to Europe and to England in a heartbeat. They'll do it in a heartbeat.
They would, AI, and look, people who follow this channel will know that I'm not going to speak for my fellow panelists here, but from my point of view, I'm a little bit suspicious of the likes of Tommy Robinson, for example, because of the Zionist links and the fact that when you see a Tommy Robinson protest in London, you very often have a bloody great Israeli flag over Union Jacks, over British Union flags. And I'm sorry, that's not something I support at all.
Well, yeah,
I mean, I'm by no means in favor of the Palestinians, but I'm not in favor of the Zionists either. I'm very neutral on that shit.
Well, yeah, and it's like the conversation we're having here isn't even exclusive to this group. Like, even if you're a Sivnat, heaven forbid, and you're in that sort of group, like the Sikhs aren't really your friend, right? But they keep inviting them into their groups all the time. And it's like you can go on the internet and find like Sikh internet forums, and the way in which they talk about us and what it is their goals are by intersecting our politics are not particularly pleasant. And it's the same issue. Obviously, that one's not one we fall afoul of because they're brown, but it's kind of an issue that afflicts lots of different groups.
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%. I agree with you.
I mean, on the local level where I am, we have the problem. It's actually with Portuguese, believe it or not. I mean, so it could be worse. could be worse sort of thing. But it's the Portuguese, and they have on the local council political level dominated not just like the Conservative Party, but actually even in Labour, and now a couple of them have been trying to pivot into reform in preparation for whenever we have local elections and reform may pick up seats. So. And they even though that they're on different parties, they all know each other. They all have the same sort of community centre. They all have their own like little community. I remember seeing like the Polish one, but also their little community centre a few years ago. And also, yeah, I mean they absolutely do. I mean it's no different. They operate in their own sort of personal interest, and how many times do we have to beat the drum, for English people who are on our side but are just so fucking retarded? I mean, I'm sorry, but it's just how many times have we got to beat the drum? They did like strength comes from within your own group. God damn it! I mean,
yeah. No, I don't disagree with you at all, AI. I do think this is an issue. I mean, I've fallen out with people who were involved with reform because they don't like their chairman, who's a Sri Lankan Muslim, and I don't understand why a Sri Lankan Muslim is the chairman of reform at all. And I've had reform people try and explain it to me, and it still makes no sense to me. So,
well, I mean, the people in question, I don't really think particularly highly of them on any matters. But one thing I do know enough about them to tell you that if they latch on to the next political fad, if reform, I can tell you now, even though that they like to, and they probably would agree with us here and now in the present on, say, the sovereign question of Northern Ireland, of Ulster. But if reform and the network of the populist right magically tomorrow came up with saying actually Ulster should be part of Ireland and that became the new normal.
Oh yeah, they changed their tune.
Yeah,
Yep,
they
they
would
would change their tune in a second.
In a second.
Yes.
Which they have done countless times. First of all, political Islam is the enemy. Oh, but it's okay because we have a Muslim chairman of the party. Well, political Muslims have they have their own in-group preference, and we can't be trusted to run institutions, but they can run ours. I mean, these people are just so fucking inconsistent. I mean, and I know tonight one of them is still doing his shitty little, laughing at the you know which one I'm talking about.
I know who you're talking about. Yes.
Yeah, and he hasn't moved on. He hasn't fucking moved on in what 5-6 years, but
But no, you're quite correct. I know if the Reform leadership suddenly came up with a policy that we want to give away Northern Ireland, that particular person I know would switch on a dime for certain.
Yeah, and he would probably copy some James Lindsay, some fucking brainlet talking point saying actually, you're actually a communist fascist if you don't agree with it, or some stupid shit like that.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree with you at all. I think Aaron raised a good point. It's worth discussing. I mean, I don't think we can solve it, but it's certainly worth discussing. But I mean, me, I'm a British nationalist. I'm not just an English nationalist. I want to retain the Union. I think Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland are valuable parts of Great Britain. So,
I mean, I think the only way we can deal with it is stepping over these brainless muppets. I mean, that's the only. I think that's the only way we can deal with it. And people in chat can deal with it. Is just stepping over these people. But
I tell you what, I actually hope. I mean, I'm not saying this will ever happen, and I'm certainly not saying it'll happen in my lifetime, what's left of it. But I actually hope that eventually Ireland becomes closer to Britain again. That's what I would actually prefer. But
actually, Black Pigeon Pill just I do remember that actually when you had the referendum. I think it was back in 2013, 2014. Boris was saying he wanted to give the City of London independence, and that wasn't some blustering, Churchillian sort of spurg out of his. It was actually a genuine Churchillian spurg out of his.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, and I do vaguely remember that myself, but I know why, of course. Boris being Boris, although Boris is not actually what anyone in his family calls him, but whatever. All right, guys. I think. Sorry, Mitch. You carry on.
I don't know if apparently there's some rumours that Boris wants to make a comeback into the Conservative Party after these local elections.
I don't see that going too well, but who knows?
I think he isn't. I think he's not as popular as he was. If he was to make a comeback, I don't think it would be enough as a bounce for the Conservatives.
I mean, he's best known today. Isn't he best known today, Alexander Johnson, for being one of the main drivers for getting hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians killed by keeping the war going?
Well, and also Boris wave. I mean, that's something you see more.
And the Boris wave of mass immigration, of course.
Boris wave of mass immigration. Yeah, I mean, Boris is kind of like a '90s relic. He's like a '90s post Blair Tory relic. And
we were actually talking about Conservative leadership a little bit before we went before we went live, and I think we might come back to talk about that because Aaron actually made an interesting post on X on Twitter, talking about possible election results in 2029. So maybe we'll come back to this subject in a little bit. But we've been going 45 minutes, and so given there's 5 of us this evening, I want to move on to Mitch's first topic, if people would forgive me. So, but before we do, I'd like to say thank you very much to Garen for $10 USD, which just says hello. Thank you for supporting the channel, Garen. If anyone wants to support the channel or to send us a super chat question, you can do so via Entropy. And there is a link which is pinned at the top of the chat. So just click on that link and you can do it that way. Okay, Mitch, did you have a first topic for this evening?
Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has heard of it. AfD in Germany has been declared a right-wing extremist organization. So in other words, the domestic security agencies, they can just monitor the party however they wish. They can even stop a party from being publicly funded, and it can even shut down the party if it wanted to. Like they could outright ban the party off such a description. So it's not looking like, and as I always said earlier, the thing was, the leader is. No, I was trying to think of her name. She's a lesbian married to a Sri Lankan woman, and she lives in Switzerland to dodge taxes. Like she's not at all like like Alice Weidel is not particularly the most right wing person you could have. I mean, there's the guy in Turingen who his name I forget, but like that branch of AfD, massively right wing, Zuma army that helped Björn Höcke, that's his name, Björn Höcke, who is his faction of a party would basically topple all the Holocaust memorials because they're called memorials of shame and whatnot. And of course, that particular chapter of German history is used to whip them every 5 minutes to say, oh, well, your granddad did this, therefore you need to let in loads of Turks into Chemnitz or whatever. So AfD is going to have a tough time. They're probably going to get banned, although the thing is, this sort of Damocles has hung over their heads for bloody ages. So I can imagine the local branches have prepped for this. I don't know how exactly they'd organise nationally afterwards, but it's going to be a position where AfD they're going to have a tough time dealing with the courts and also the security services in the short to medium term future until the next election, I suppose.
I do think I don't think they banned the AfD because of the lesbian lesbian leader. I do think that, and I have no doubt that they looked at the like the smaller AfD branches around Germany, how radical they were, how right wing they are, and also just how the youth were. I mean, there's a very sort of prominent youth movement as well. That is probably the threat to the regime more so than, of course, the lesbian, and probably. I don't know. I don't know the political dynamics in France and National Rally and what areas that they have sizable control. But I imagine even on the smaller branch level, you do have the more radical elements there. But bearing in mind, I think what makes Germany quite interesting one, especially with its AfD branches, the more radical element, is that it is Germany itself, more so than I think any other European country, more so than us, definitely, has had the penultimate psyop of anti-traditionalism for 70, 80 years, right? Particularly in the West. the East had a different experience than, you know, with what they call denazification. But you still had, basically Germany was people would always say, well, Germany's like the most cuck nation in Europe. But even Germany, which has been the most, staunch sort of attacking against traditional values, traditionalism, has still managed to have a breakthrough, and managed to break out of those, those chains of liberal democratic, sort of ways of thinking.
But I think I'm right in saying that the AfD is particularly strong in what used to be East Germany, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and this is the thing you find is that, and this term has been used about, quite. I can't remember who sort of coined it, but multiple figures. I think even Evola pointed this out, before in the 60s and the 70s. You had in Western Europe, you had the influence of America and liberalism, and then you had the Bolshevism and communism in the East. But what Bolshevism and communism did was, while it attacked it surpassed it put their own people in charge, and there was an element of tyranny. It's not like it attacked the culture in its entirety. It basically like froze it in amber. That was one term I've seen go around, froze it in amber. But then if you look at the liberal West, it was like you had this total, top down change of sort of, I mean, like, say, I've seen people have been talking today about, jazz, right, and how that was forced in places like Western Europe, um and supplanting European high culture, like like Mozart and the theaters. And so you did have that radical change even, then, and as a result, when you had the, um, denazification and its aftermath, the West, in some ways, is far more egalitarian and left wing than aspects of the East. While yes, you had communism and the collective spirit of communism, it didn't attack traditionalism on that level. And a lot of people will push back on me because, for example, East Germany was basically, even like today, it's completely atheistic. It's completely atheistic, and unlike parts of the West where you have Lutheran, the Lutheran German Church and Catholicism that still permeates, and that's usually one. But I said, well, that's just a temporal institution. So that doesn't mean anything, because I mean, like the Lutheran churches that, I mean, I'm usually left wing anyway at this point, so it doesn't really mean anything. But it's look at how the people behave and people react. And the East Germans are the people in East Germany today are far more nationalistic and unashamed of their own German identity.
Yeah, I was going to say so I know because if you look on YouTube, you can find like say Romanian or Hungarian or Polish films from the communist period where they'll just show medieval armor. They don't bother to portray it like Ridley Scott does, where everything's bleak and there's no color. Like they still pay a lot of respect to that era. They still will have a lot of anti-Christian stuff, of course, but it still pays its homage in its own way towards the culture. I know with East Germany, so because the German, like back before when Germany was not more nationalist, they had what was called the folkish spirit. West Germany completely destroyed that by importing American liberalism and just uh, bringing lots of Turks from the 1960s onward. Boy, that was because of JFK. JFK pressured the Germans, taking loads of Turks for the sake of getting on the good side of Turkey, because at the time, JFK wanted the Turks in, so just put nuclear weapons there, and that's what precipitated the Cuban Missile Crisis. As so, whereas with East Germany, they didn't get rid of a folkish spirit. They just reappropriated it towards international socialism. So instead of, the old National Socialism, where it's all about Volksgemeinschaft and national community, they just pivot it away towards more international socialism. So you'll have like East German engineers going to Ethiopia in the 70s or whatever, and that's generally what East Germany would do. But still have the same spirit of, Volksgemeinschaft, but just don't do it in the same way.
We actually killed East German officers in Southwest Africa, mate. In the 1980s, we killed East German officers who were advising SWAPO. So yeah, for sure. Adamant, what's your take on this AFD stuff?
I mean, I obviously I kind of still want to believe in the easy route of having a political option, but I mean, like the AFD is actually, like we were talking about other parties like trying to appeal to the centre, and you were talking earlier about certain people that haven't moved on, and I know that they constantly justify reforms moderation by saying that they're trying to make themselves impervious to being cancelled, but the AFD has done this. The AFD nuked its youth wing because they were, a bit too radical, according to the AFD. They've tried to sort of drag themselves to the centre and sort of cut off their sharp edge, and it didn't save them ultimately.
I mean, it's cowardice. I mean, I'm not really afraid to say that sort of train of thought is just cowardice because you don't want to confront the real issues. And this is the thing is, I'm of the view now, and I'm sort of, we're all sick and tired of these charlatans. I mean, it's like you're being. It feels like all these people are just out to scam you at this point. You either stand about your position, but then if you're but you do not get to and this is where I'm so sick of them, is that they'll do the lip service, but then suddenly they will backtrack and say, actually no, we need to appear to the center. And it's like, okay, well, great. I mean, what was the purpose of the last several months? Well, what was the purpose? You might as well have just joined up with Reform or the Tories or Labour, whoever. And the thing there is, look at
one
the
thing,
Greens.
AI, could we leave the British politics for a little bit, because we are going to talk about reform and stuff in a minute. So if we could just stick to the German situation for the moment. But the thing I would say, and I know that Martin Lederman's been pointing it out in the chat, who I think is German, Germany has a fairly peculiar constitution, and parties can be quite easily banned in Germany, and always have been able to be banned since World War II. So
I think that's the provision, but because of its federalized setup, I think it's actually quite hard in practice for them to do it. This is quite a big step for them, I think.
Okay. But, well, I mean, I hope you're right, Alan, because I hope the AfD takes power in Germany. But
I think that there has been groups who have been classed as neo-Nazi groups in Germany, which have been banned. But I think what, as Mitch said, what Asman said, is that what makes this different is, I mean, they're kind of either the second largest or largest parties in these German states, and also in some cases they are running local local councils. So it's not like just some rando group of 10 people meeting in a sort of a back of a pub or anything that are sort of a radical German nationalists.
Aaron, what's your views on this? You haven't said anything yet.
I'm not surprised. This is quite typically the German way of doing things. And one thing I will push back on is the idea that this is because of American influence. No, the Americans have certainly had an influence, but West Germany and now modern day Germany is very much a continuation of German political traditions during the early interwar period, so 1918 to 1933. The Weimar Republic would have banned parties if they'd had the chance. There's a continuity there between the Weimar Republic and Monday Germany. And
I think I'm right in saying, Aaron, that people like J.D. Vance and certainly what's his name from Twitter, from X, have actually said they support the AfD.
yeah, they have, yeah. And there's certainly now American support for the AfD, and I do feel this sort of blaming the Americans for the present state of Germany is refusing to face facts. This is very much a homegrown German issue. It is not it's not particularly an American influence issue. And I will just say one thing, just to say something to Martin Lederman's point. He's quite right about the fact that East Germany was a very German state. When the Soviets established it after the war, it was very much it was meant to be not merely a communist state in Eastern Germany. It was meant to be a German communist state, and you can see that most notably in sort of the uniforms and esprit de corps of the East German army, which directly draws on German traditions, unlike the West German army, where they do not draw on the German military tradition, particularly the Prussian one, in their uniforms. That's a Monday.
Very, very true. Mitch, this is your subject. Did you have some wrap-up thoughts on it?
I would say that to some extent you can blame America for some of the ills in Germany in the sense that, well, so Germany's got loads of Turks. Back in the 50s, the Germans were happy enough with the Yugoslavs and Italian guest workers, because they stay temporarily, they work their contracts, and then they go back home. Then JFK comes along and he says, okay, he wants the Turks in NATO, therefore he strong-armed the Germans to take in lots of Turkish guest workers. And then once loads of Turkish guest workers came in, it then became a position where the Germans just gave up and gave up trying to entice these people to go, because, of course, at that time, Turkey was a backwater compared to Germany. So you just had a situation where JFK, in a way, he screwed over the Germans big time in the name of getting the Turks into NATO. And that's not, but then again, it's also the fault of a lot of CD. I think Willy Brandt in the 70s was also like, but it's not the same debate with how, on one hand we can blame America a lot for our ills over here, but at the same time it's also a lot of our problems are domestic as well in terms of our politicians. Like, no one forced us to have Windrush. It was a matter of Clement Attlee did it to us, and Labour, Howard Wilson and others like him. And it's a matter of I know the Germans. So they have, I think it's called a basic law, where they can just ban parties if they fulfill the criteria. For example, back in 1951, there was a National Socialist Party by Otto Ernst Riemer called Socialist Reich Party. They were banned because they won like about 500,000 votes up in like Lower Saxony, up in the north of Germany. So it's a matter of, if a right-wing party were to be successful enough in Germany, the state will come in and just ban them outright, if at all possible. Now, I don't know how successful this will be with AfD, because I said they've got loads of branches all over the country. It is quite a bit of a black pill with Germany, because you have the West, from like you have, for example, Lower Saxony, Schleswig-Holstein, and NRV, North Rhine-Westphalia, and other areas where it's just a matter of they carry on voting CDU or SPD all the damn time. And also the Die Linke party, who are basically like the you imagine if there's a German version of Corbyn, but even more insane, because there's a fair argument to say the Germans do ideology max, as Jacob Conley said, because you see like the German parties on the left, they're even more insane compared to parties over here. So
I saw footage of like one of their conference. You had like this sort of disabled black man, sort of, and like this really tall tranny that looked like, well, I mean, it looked cartoon. If I was showing that out of context, I would have thought that that was like a skit. To be honest, it doesn't look real. It looks like uh, a trans ableist joke. To be honest, but
I
yeah,
mean,
they sort of,
even the Green Party out there was largely formed by like former Stasi leaders. It's pretty mad.
well, I mean, on the denazification front, you know, you had like the Information Control Division of the U.S. Army that, you know, went about implementing what was called, you know, the denazification, but then they sort of extended it to, well, denazification and or militarism, which then includes, this is where you have the aspect of German history. So anything that venerated, I mean, even down to, um, you know, medieval, like sort of depictions of the Teutonic Knights, or Henry the Lion, you know, the Duke of, you know, Saxony, or even, you know, parts of Charlemagne, for example. Anything that depicted anything that was barely militaristic, or anything of that's German, of any German history, was sort of clamped down on, and that was by a U.S. Army unit. So, I mean, it's hard to argue that there wasn't, you know, that they don't have a role to play. They, you know, but they, well,
Can I just respond to
Yeah,
something? Martin
go for it.
Lederman says, as for the Weimar traditions, they were mostly rooted out by the Nazis, so it was the Allied powers who reinstated them. No, the Nazis did not root them out. They reworked them for their own ends. And you say the Allies reinstated them. Well, the Allies couldn't have reinstated them if they weren't there in the first place. Now, to AI's point, I do accept the Americans have had an influence, but I feel that that is over-inflated, and the German sort of traditions that are being drawn on are under accepted in this situation. That we're too easy to blame the Americans when it is to a degree us who are to blame. We're avoiding responsibility in these things. And
well, I
using the
understand.
Americans as an easy way out, blaming them as an easy way out.
I understand that, but at the same time, the censorship was led up by an American, like an entire separate, like, information control division. I mean, I'm sure Britain, you know, British government and French played their roles as well, but I mean, I'm saying is, you know, Germany was carved up, you know, after the war. You know, the Soviets in the east and the Western allies in the west. There was at this point, so I'm talking about 46. So you didn't have an established, you know, Cold War German states. There was no German governance of itself, and I'm just saying, like, the only power there is, you know, is America and Britain, but America was leading this initiative. And there's actually, I mean, I remember watching years ago. I think it was for um, American troops who were to be stationed in in Germany around this time in the 40s, early 50s. It's like called Know Your Enemy, and it was straight up, probably from, you know, their information and control division, where it said, you know, they talked about the Nazis being this inherently violent organization, which, okay, I can understand why the propaganda would, they would sort of pivot to that, but then they just, a good part of that information video would then go on attack medieval German history, the Prussians, even the Holy Roman Empire. So it does feel that there was a very malicious attack on, that was coordinated attack on the German people that went beyond the remit of Nazism.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I'd just like to point out we've got over 100 viewers at the moment, which is good. If you're first time listening to the channel, welcome. Do subscribe and please hit the like button on YouTube because it does help the channel. AI, did you have a first subject for this evening?
The only thing I would actually say is there is a channel called Nord Huger who has been on my YouTube channel a few times. I think I've been on his once, and he released a documentary that's been in the works for a bit, looking at Norse. Originally it was like Norse sagas, Norse culture, and what have you, and then also looking at how Norse paganism and Germanic paganism as a whole, and how it ties into the concept of Ragnarok and the arrival and the emergence of Christianity, particularly Christianity in the Scandinavian countries on a historic level. And he put together this documentary looking at the idea, and it's also, you got Survive the Jive on it. You've also got a few other there's a Danish chap who was but I forgot his name, but he has a YouTube, I think he has a YouTube channel as well, where he talks about sort of Lutheran theology on his channel, and it's basically this exploring this idea of where the commonality between sort of the new emerging youth who are adopting forms of Christianity, which is traditional, but also the re-emergence in some circles of in this case, Germanic paganism, and why there's a sort of commonality. What do they want? What do they seek? And it's on Nord Huger's channel. I'll put a link out in chat, and I'll it's a really good well put together documentary.
AI, don't put a link in chat. YouTube doesn't like it, but if you send it to me, I'll put it under the stream afterwards.
Oh, okay, I'll put it under. As I say, it's a friend of the channel. I've spoken to him before. I've spoken to Survive Jive as well. So this is actually a really good sort of chat, because also it comes down to the crux of, I guess, our previous topic as well, of national identity, and how we perceive identity and what is actual identity, and also and sort of ancient wisdom as well that comes along with that. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you, AI. If you DM me the link on Discord or something, I'll make sure I put it under the stream afterwards. But if you put links in chat, YouTube doesn't like that very much. I was just going to say that Tom Rouse, Survive the Jive, is really good. I've followed him for a long time, and I do follow him on YouTube and also on X, on Twitter. So yeah, sounds good, AI. Does anyone have anything to add to that?
No. I will have to hop off though myself. It is getting late, and
I was just gonna ask you if you had a first topic for this evening, Adam, before you go.
No, I've been mulling over stuff in my head, but no, I haven't really. I mean, we've covered most of the sort of good ends of the news cycle, I think.
Yeah, you could. If you, I'm sure you'll come up with something for next week. But as far as I'm concerned, I want to talk a little bit about the local elections and reform, and also a very brief thing on the Australian federal election.
Yeah, I'll have to hop off though. I mean, yeah, I'd have to talk about it another time, I suppose. But,
All right, mate, you're always most welcome on the stream. And I hope Davey in the chat is right and you got a date. That'd be good.
no, I've got work, sadly.
Oh, the opposite to a date then. Sorry,
Yeah.
mate.
Yeah, tragic. Anyway, good night all. Talk to you all soon.
Thanks for joining, Adam.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime.
So, okay, given that Adam doesn't have a first topic, AI, did you have anything else you wanted to talk about before we move on to the English local elections? And then we're going to talk a little bit about the Australian federal election.
No, I don't think so. I think we'll probably go over to local elections.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about reform and the English local elections. I mean, obviously, reform did very well. I saw some idiot who wants to rejoin the EU on X saying, oh, they've only got, I don't know, however many local councillors they've got out of 2,200. But of course, what he didn't mention was that that includes places which were not up for election on this occasion, like outside England. And also the Labour Party counselled a lot of the English elections. So, that's not hardly reform's fault, is it?
I mean, it's quite funny because they cancelled it for the their argument was that it was like administrative changes that need to be done to the council, so it wouldn't be fair for an election to take place. And of course, many people pointed that said, well, this is just it was a Labour Tory stitch up because the Tories were also in favour of this, councillors as well. Because it was a way of
them knew they were going to lose seats. That's why.
Yeah, they'll lose seats. Yeah, and so there was like you even had like that Miriam. What's her name? That BBC verified that Miriam Spriggan, or I don't know whatever the hell her name is.
I just don't watch the Biased Brainwashing Corporation at all.
Yeah, she put out like saying, actually, guys, this is unfounded. This is unfounded fake news. This isn't a cancelled election because elections will be held, but they just won't be held now. It'll be held later on.
It's amazing, these guys. I mean, look, I'm not a particularly strong Democrat. I'm not particularly in favor of democracy in the form that we have it these days anyway. And yet these people who do supposedly support it, whether it be in Britain or in Germany with the AfD or in France with Marine Le Pen, they're very happy to subvert it anytime they want, basically. Even their own form of democracy that they supposedly support.
Well, I guess, this is the thing we have in the West, if you're fighting the Nazis, then that is the exception to the rule.
Well, I mean, just as an aside, and it's a little bit of a sidetrack, I noticed the Labour Party are organising a big military parade and a fly past for VE Day this year. Right, so it's 80th anniversary, supposedly, which means basically almost all of the veterans are dead. Because in order to have gone overseas, you'd have to be at least 98 years old now, which means there are a handful left these days. So all you're going to get on this parade in terms of veterans, in air quotes, is you're going to get some little old ladies who were in non-combat jobs because they were the only sort of jobs they could do in World War II. And you're going to get a collection of elderly war widows because, as we all know, women tend to live quite a bit longer than men do. But what's the purpose of this bloody parade and fly past?
I heard. I don't know if this is true. I don't know if this is true, but I heard that they're like hiring actors to dress up as well in this parade.
For God's sake. Yeah. I mean, in Australia for like Anzac Day, which we had recently, you will get little kids and women wearing the medals of their ancestors, and I'm not really in favour of that, to be honest with you. I think they can carry them by all means, but I don't think they should be wearing them. But you know, to me, it's and with Anzac Day, it's okay, I suppose, because a bit like Armistice Day in Britain, it's supposed to commemorate all the people who've been killed from about 1914 up until today. So from that point of view, I support that. I'm certainly not against Armistice Day, for example, or Anzac Day in Australia. But why do we need a big parade for VE Day? I mean, World War II was a disaster for Britain for the most part.
I mean, if I was to guess, I reckon the parade itself will be it'll be demonstrating British values of diversity, inclusion against the forces of fascism and Nazism. It's going to be basically just a full-out political ideological. You're going to have the multiracial representation of London, and they'll say, well, that's the face of Britain, and they're going to be parade. There's going to be a parade celebration against the forces of Nazism, and there'll probably be even messaging saying, you know, we have to. I mean, they may even wheel out some old like widow, maybe even like a left-wing widow or Holocaust survivor or someone like that, and saying about, you know, how we must even be vigilant today against Nazism because it's re-emerging everywhere in Europe, whether it be the lesbian with the Sri Lankan wife, yeah, or you know, or the guy in Holland who worships Israel. You know, they're going to come back. They're going to come back. He's going to come back. You know, like Voldemort, he's going to come back.
To me, it's bullshit, and you know, I'm quite happy to celebrate the bravery and courage of British troops or sailors or airmen in World War II. Quite happy to celebrate that. But in terms of commemorating the war as a good thing, no, sorry, not doing that, because it wasn't. It destroyed the British Empire, basically.
I also viewed it as a bit of a well.
Hang on a minute, AI. Can I just say to Real Christian in the chat, please stop typing in all caps in my chat or I will ban you. Stop it, please. That's shouting. Don't do it. Sorry, AI, carry on.
Yeah, I mean, a good percentage as well of the British forces were. I mean, the war hadn't. Again, this is something that I, on a personal level, is it in many people they view like VE Day as the end of the Second World War, but in reality, it wasn't. Most forces were the British forces were still active because they were still fighting against Japanese in the Pacific.
Yes.
And they were
14th
fighting
Army in Burma and also the largest Royal Navy fleet of World War II, the forgotten the British Pacific Fleet, which was fighting alongside the Americans off Japan. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, and the reason that that vast bit of the war is forgotten, has been memory hold, is because the people out there were basically fighting. The British were fighting for the defense of the empire. But then when the war, the legacy of the war is what it has been formed into now, veterans, the reason why so many veterans, and it's been coined the Forgotten Army, is because the British establishment after the war, you know, basically just, you know, scrubbed the legacy of Burma, of the Far East in general, of the Pacific campaigns from effectively from the record.
Yeah,
there's very
and
little.
Of course, the British Pacific Fleet, of course, was based in Sydney in Australia. That was its ultimate base out in the Pacific.
And whenever they do talk about the Burma or the Pacific conflict, I mean, a lot of it will be you'll have the Anzacs in Papua New Guinea, which is you'll have I think there's been a fair few documentaries and a couple films sort of focusing on that. But in India, for example, in Burma, it's always in this country. It's always about the British Indian Army and the Indian troops in that, and it's always used as a way of justifying Indian immigration into the UK.
And of course, they always forget that every Indian infantry division had 3 British battalions in it. because every
Yeah.
Indian infantry brigade had a British battalion in it. So no Indian division, and they're called Indian divisions, but they wouldn't. None of them were all Indian. They all had British troops in them.
Yeah, if you look at, like, if you type
And of
in
course, the
Stockfoot,
14th Army Burma actually had all British divisions as well. So
yeah, if
you
you
know,
if you type in stock footage, Battle of Kohima, like we were doing, I mean, it just comes up with English lads and British lads.
yep. Because in Kohima in particular, the main part of the defence was the 4th Royal West Kent Regiment. So, you know, you don't get much more English than that.
Yeah. But this is, I mean, and this is something my grandfather always used to say, was that, after the war, the empire itself was seen as, it was seen as on par by the powers that be as that of, fascism and Nazi Germany. It was just viewed as like this horrible, shameful stain on Britain, and so it was memory hold from the war. And
Look, I certainly think that's the way they try and teach the British Empire these days. And of course, it's a complete fucking lie. But anyway, I did it before we go back to reform, because, and this is my fault, we got a bit sidetracked. I'll just ask Aaron and Mitch if they've got anything to say about this bloody silly VE Day parade that Labour want to hold.
The reason it's being done is quite simple. There isn't any kind of conspiracy or some kind of sinister thing behind it. It's just because it's the 80th anniversary of the end of the war, and it's a tradition now since 1945. There will obviously be the diversity is our strength and British values bits added to it, but that's just addition. That's just cosmetic. Reason it's being done is just because at this point it's now a tradition to celebrate it, and it's nothing.
I'm just surprised, Aaron, they can come up with enough British soldiers to hold a fucking parade these days. Yeah. So small. But, you know. Mitch, anything to say about this? And then we're going to go back onto reform, which I know you will want to say a few words about.
No, I don't. I don't really. I haven't really kept up to. I haven't really kept up to the news regarding the VE Day, but I just assume Starmer has been regarding the local council results, he's not been too responsive. He's just been the usual robot. So I just think VE Day is just going to be a chance for the Stormer bunker to cheer himself up, I suppose. Stormer boss, I should say.
Yeah, and try and G people up about going to war with Putla. So, you know, which is fucking ridiculous. But anyway, apart from the fact we'd lose badly, but anyway. All right, so let's go back to the local elections, and Reform did really well. I mean, they took seats from Labour and the Conservatives, as far as I can see. Does Aaron or Mitch have anything much to say about Reform? I mean, I've got my issues with the Reform leadership, but I'm still quite glad they did quite well, because, I mean, who the hell else can you vote for, you know?
To answer that black pushing, yes, like the two main parties are buggers. I'd say. However, we're not going to get rid of first past the post. If we were to go towards proportional representation, that'd be us locked out pill forever. Whereas first past the post, yeah, it can have its issues with moments like where the Labour Party gets only a third of the vote, but 2/3 of seats. But that can easily rebound our way. Whereas if we were going to go to PR, it would just be based off of Weimar Germany, where it would always be chaotic. It'd be off the continent, and we wouldn't have it'd be harder for the right to have a functioning government, because there's more left wing parties like the Greens, Lib Dems, and Labour than there are right wing parties. So that's the problem you've got if we were to get rid of first past the post. As for I got my issues with Reform. However, I think Aaron said it best last night, where he said Farage is the kind of guy who likes to be liked. So if the 677 councillors that Reform's picked up, if they start reporting to Farage, okay, we're hearing a lot of murmurs on the ground about people being dismayed about Reform appearing soft on Islam, for argument's sake. Farage might pivot to the right for a simple fact, but yeah, he screwed over Rupert Lowe over stuff which, if he just said, "Oh, Rupert Lowe wasn't much of a team player," that'd be one thing. But like the allegations, but yeah, the fact of the matter remains. Aaron and I are probably of opinion of we don't think reform will stay complacent. I suppose the main danger will be stuff like because you've got Richard Tice saying, "Oh well, he's going to tell the Lincolnshire councillors not to greenlight any pylons or battery storage systems," which is just it's just stupid boomer NIMBYism. That is just it's a shitty hill to die upon compared to what Farage said about reform councillors going to cause a massive stink about migrant hotels and DEI and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Mitch. I mean, look, although actually I'm entirely in favour of reform being against all this so-called green energy bullshit. But I'd like to bring this back to Aaron because Aaron did a post on X not that long before we went live, where he was talking about possible results for the next general election, the parliamentary election. Aaron, like I said, in my opinion, the first two scenarios you put forward are much more likely than the second two, but that's because I think Labour's going to get less popular, not more.
Yeah, just before I do get out, Duke, I just want to mention the first past the post business. Farage and elements of reform have in the past been in favour of training to PR. However, that is mainly, as far as I'm concerned, because they haven't been able to win on the first past the post in any big way. However, now with the victories we've seen a few days ago, I think that opposition to first past the post will be dropped quite quickly, and the first past the post system will remain in place. When it comes now, for those who didn't see the post, my four outcomes are. Let me just get them up to make sure I quote them properly. Just bear with me a second. Right. So the first option is reform wins with a small working majority and Farage is Prime Minister. The second is that Reform is the largest party in the whole Parliament and forms a minority government under Farage, with a confidence and supply agreement with the Tories and the DUP. Outcome number three is, after losing its majority, Labour remains in power as a minority government, with Starmer staying on as PM, through a confidence and supply agreement with the Lib Dems, the SDLP, which is a party in Northern Ireland, and possibly the Greens. And the fourth outcome is that Labour again loses its majority, but remains in power with Starmer as PM, a coalition with the Lib Dems, and possibly a confidence and supply agreement with the SDP and the Greens to shore the coalition up. And I can see what you mean, Duke, about the idea of the first two being likely. And I actually do think the first two are a real possibility of happening. However, I do think that if reform doesn't play its hand, the hand is being dealt correctly. So, for example, doing what Tice is doing about the green energy stuff and not concentrating on migration, reform may not do as well as it could at the general election. And that may lead to Labour not suffering the complete wipeout that it deserves, and then leaving them with enough, there'll be enough MPs with the parliamentary arithmetic to do option 3 or 4. So that I agree with you that I think options 1 or 2 are most likely, but I do think there is a possibility, depending on how reform handles itself over the next 4 years, for options 3 or 4 to come about.
I'll be honest with you, Aaron. I think it's much more likely to be 3 years, but okay.
I think we're going to be here until 2029. Labour knows they're going to suffer at the next general election, so they're going to wait to the very bitter end. And I don't think
maybe
I don't think Starmer will be replaced either, because the Labour Party is, as far as I can tell, looking at its history, completely congenitally incapable of removing their leaders when they were in Downing Street. They can do it.
Yeah, I agree with you about that, Aaron. I don't think Starmer's going anywhere, and I think it would just cause Labour even more problems to try and replace him, to be honest.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I think it's quite likely, and we see it very often, that parties that are not doing very well actually quite often decide that about a year to 18 months before the election has to be held that maybe they're just going to have one anyway. And I think that could happen. But AI, what's your thinking about this stuff about the next general election?
I mean, it's difficult. I can see a scenario where Kemi Badenoch is replaced, Generic is brought in, and that reform or reform collapses, or Farage gets. I mean, we've talked about before, if Farage gets bored and decides to just leave, it will just collapse again. Like UKIP, Brexit Party has happened before. I think the problem, I actually do think one of the problems that the Labour Party has got is actually from their radical left, particularly in the Green Party. Places like Bristol, it started with Brighton, but Bristol, London are moving now, on the local, but also on the national level towards the Green Party. You also have the most obvious thing is that their own client groups, their sort of Pakistani, Bangladeshi, foreign alien client groups, aren't, falling under the party banner like they used to, and are now voting like their own independent, I guess what's been coined like Islamist MPs.
You're going to
their own
get more
communities.
of that AI by 2028. Say there's going to be more of that, and those guys are only going to take votes away from the Labour Party. They're certainly not taking votes away from Reform or the Conservatives.
Yeah, and so I think, I think Labour's. I don't think. I think the threat for Labour isn't necessarily reform. Because if I'm absolutely honest, the fact that they've got their councillors, I guess, is better on the local level, but at the same time, the Green Party have been for years now chipping away at the Labour Party, and they are more radical. They are more radical left wing, and they're not being contained by the Labour Party, and that, I think, that is their biggest threat.
I think the Islamist guys are actually a bigger threat to Labour, to be honest with you, in the big cities.
Well, yeah, some areas of like Northern England, certainly, but I think among the like southern middle class intelligentsia, which Labour have, who are usually made up of white, like white English people, white British people, or what have you.
Silly middle class idiots who are greenies.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like the students and all that sort of stuff. A collection of students and the silly petty bourgeois types are pivoting towards green. I've seen it. I've seen it happen. I think the dam broke with that was when the Labour Party got rid of Corbyn. Yeah.
I mean, before I bring Mitch back in on this, which I want to give Mitch the final word on this stuff, because I know he follows reform much more closely than any of us do. I just say this: I don't think it's a mistake on reform's part to be anti-net zero. I don't think net zero is all that popular with a lot of people, and it's going to become even more unpopular as energy costs continue to increase. But Mitch, I'm going to give you the final say on this, because I know you follow this stuff closer than any of us do.
Well, first off, Richard Toyce, he came to say, for example, he's saying we need to build underground cables as opposed to polygons. Well, that would just make energy bills more expensive, alongside the battery storage system thing, which I don't understand why Richard Toyce is making as a hill to die upon. It just strikes me as boomer NIMBYism and just boomer obsession about net zero. Like, the net zero stuff, like I would just resolve it by planting loads of trees, re-rolled in some parts, investing massively into nuclear, and decreasing the population naturally through just letting the population fall. One way I would do it, of course, is deporting a lot of people who don't belong here, but that's an issue for another day. That's what I would do. But Reform are not doing that. They're just creating these retarded policies about net zero, which is actually going to hike up energy bills more than actually bring them down. So that's why Reform's boomerism about this, it's stupid, especially on Richard Tyson part. Secondly, for Greens, yeah, they've muscled in on Lambeth, for example. Now, Lambeth, that was Labour held. Now, the councils now are a lot more Green held now. However, one thing to note is west of England mayoral election, which includes Bristol, I was expecting Green Party to win or at least get second place. Nope. The Labour held on to it, and the Green Party were third, with Aaron Banks on behalf of Reform being second. So, and apparently the Guardian was quoting some anonymous Labour MP who was going, "We're lucky that the Green Party are so crap at what they do because, I mean, you look at the Green Party, no one knows who the leadership are, and I mean, when you look at the Green Party, you see them as unserious because they're all like, oh, we want green energy, but they're opposing nuclear. So people just look at the Green Party and go, fair enough, if you're someone of a Jeremy Corbyn mindset where you just want all the socialism and you want the green energy stuff and you don't want to appear and you don't like Keir Starmer, then yeah, you're going to vote green. As with the Islamist stuff, I mean, you have Burnley where there's something like the Islamist candidate was an 18-year-old woman. So I'm hoping stuff like that persuades Farage to go a bit more radical on the Islamic issue because this is second generation or third generation Muslim. Integration is not happening at all as he wants it to happen. So I'm hoping stuff like that. Because in Burnley, it was like second place was Reform on 1,000 votes. So basically, you're going to get sectarianism where the English people, they vote Reform. The Muslims vote for their own candidates or Labour, depending on the area. And you're just going to have areas that, like the Shires, like the Cotswolds, that don't see much immigration. They're going to still carry on voting Lib Dem. But if those areas were to have a migrant hotel foisted upon them, they'll vote Reform overnight. That's the thing about Lib Dems, they're cushy centrists.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, Mitch. I mean, look, my problem with the leadership of Reform is it's not radical enough. That's my problem with it. And I know that's AI's problem with it. It's just not radical enough. The British public, the real Anglo-Celtic British public, are ready for something much more radical than Farage is willing to say at the moment. I also think it's almost a certainty that Kemi Badenoch won't be leading the so-called Conservative Party come the next election. I mean, I think they're going to get rid of her. And if the Conservatives have got any sense, yeah, they'll get Jenrick as leader. But because, as we were saying before we went live, will the Conservatives, in air quotes, appoint a straight white man as leader? I have my doubts, to be honest, but we'll see. We'll see. Davey, I'm no fan of Zia Youssef at all. I notice Harry Long in the chat says, what do we think's happening with the exodus from the Lotus Eaters? I wasn't sure there was an exodus from the Lotus Eaters, but if anyone on the panel has anything to say about that, then you may certainly do so. Tomb of Arminius, we're going to talk about the Aussie election briefly in a minute. Sorry, Matt, carry on.
Yeah, so on the exodus of the Lotus Eaters, of course you had the Connor Tomlinson, he left, and then recently Josh Firm, who's a co-host, he, from my understanding, he hasn't left, but he's still going to be on the panels there. It's just that he's not he's not going to be doing like hosting duties on like set segments. He's sort of going from like, from my understanding, it's going like from full-time to part-time sort of stuff. So I don't know if there's an exodus as such. Is that guy, the Jamaican guy with the frock, still about in Lotus Eaters?
I only watch them occasionally, so I'm not the guy to ask about this.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I have noticed, by the way, that Lawrence Fox is no longer appearing, isn't appearing on the Lotus Eaters as he used to be. So, but they have like they have like guests that come in every now and then. Oh, he's in America, is he? And Callum, yeah, I think because I got into Callum's appeared on my channel before. We regularly do like a Hearts of Iron sort of like team sort of playing on Hearts of Iron 4 on back in, I think it was just around the time he started Lotus Eaters. And yeah, he was he's never been interested in like politics in the sense of, you know, talking about elections or what's going on in Westminster or what's going on in here. He was never really into that sort of stuff, I don't think. But yeah.
Yep. No, I don't disagree
channel.
with anything.
I mean,
I don't watch them that often. I'll probably watch like 1 half an hour Lotus Eaters stream on YouTube a week, maybe, if it's something I'm interested in.
It's usually the history. I watch like Bo's history segments.
Yeah, I like Bo. Yeah, no, I do like Bo.
That's
Bo's
good.
a good guy. Listen, I like some of the other people on there as well, but if my problem is that Carl Benjamin is still basically a big L liberal, you know, or small L liberal. And I don't think he's ever going to totally lose that. He's got much better than he used to be, but he's still, he's a moderate at heart.
I mean, he's more in tune than most on sort of that sort of liberal side. What does the panel think of the Greek one?
I think he varies. I mean, I watched a video of a stream he was on probably about 3 weeks ago. What was he talking about? Oh, he was defending fucking Douglas Murray of all people. Yeah, he was defending Douglas Murray when he was on the Joe Rogan podcast. And like, I can't stand Douglas Murray myself, but you know, others may have a different view. I don't think anyone here is going to like him much, but I have no time for Douglas Murray at all. He's an absolute neocon and an absolute Zionist shill, basically.
I mean, I can understand people like Harry and Josh, how they got in, because they have like previous like prior stuff, and but there are people in Lotus Eaters who, you know, like Connor, who sort of, in my mind, sort of came out of nowhere. I haven't seen in our orbit, like in the Sargon orbit back in the day.
Yeah,
maybe I missed him. I don't know.
But he's left now, hasn't he? He's off doing his own.
Well, yeah, he's gone. Now, of course, there was a bit of drama because there was before Connor, there was another chap whose name I cannot remember. He was a co-host on the channel in its early times, and when he left, he was he's implied on several occasions that, well, he was sort of forced out because of Connor, and he stole his girlfriend or something like that. So he's made like several public statements where he's attacked Connor. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, Connor is definitely plugged in.
I'll just say that's a pretty low thing to do if he did. But
Well, if he
yes,
did,
okay.
if he
Yeah.
did, if he,
If he did,
but
and I have no
but
idea.
I mean, the first time I saw Connor was on GB News, and Black Pigeon Pilled this. It was right there. The first time I saw Connor was on GB News before Lotus Eaters, and he used to jump. He jumped. He sort of jumps between the two. But the latest thing I saw Connor do was he was doing like this debate with some like boomer leftists, and then you had that John, what's his name, the BBC Panorama presenter, um,
Oh my
uh,
god.
John something or other,
Okay.
who basically basically attacked him for saying, oh, it's he's saying that, well, Britain may not be free, but we're not, at least we're not poisoning you like what Putin does to his political opponents.
Oh,
uh, yeah, yeah.
oh,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Aaron, Mitch, you got anything to say about the Lotus Eaters?
Yeah, I wouldn't have to regard it as an exodus. It just seems that they've gotten a public profile, the Lotus Eaters, and they're well known, and the sort of natural growth. They're becoming sort of personalities, or media personalities of themselves on their own, and they're going to do their own things. So I know I mentioned that Connor Tomlinson was on GB News before he went to the Lotus Eaters. He was in, I can't remember he was working for an organisation called the, not Turning Point UK, but another sort of, it was a British branch of an American organisation, something youth.
The last thing I saw Connor on was what's it called? The Peter Whittle's group. He was on something they did. Was the last thing I saw Connor on.
Yeah. The New Culture Forum. Yeah. And so I just think it's a natural evolution for the people on there. So I don't regard it much as a exodus. I'm gonna say no. I don't always agree with him. I do actually like the Greek chap Stelios. I do think he's entertaining.
Yeah, I'm like you. I don't always agree with him. Like I said, when I watched that thing where he was defending Murray on the Joe Rogan thing, I thought he was talking nonsense, to be honest. But that was just me. That's just my opinion. Mitch, you got anything to say about this subject?
I don't. As to Douglas Murray, I mean, I don't really have much opinion on it. I just, he talks a fair game about like Islamic immigration and demographic replacement. So perhaps I just think he's a pick and mix kind of character. As for Connor Tomlinson, I don't trust the guy. He just strikes me as he's willing to play to our tune, but at the same time, he also wants that respectability. He just wants to be like, he wants to be on GB News, wants to have massive reputation, blah blah blah. And it's just a matter of, well, for example, he often does a whole, oh, I'm friends of Ian Hersey Ali as a means of trying to big up his own reputation. You know, every time there's a take on Twitter, he always has to put into the comments and go, oh, I said this like a couple of months ago on Lotus Eaters. It destroyed, and then someone said to him, okay, well, why don't you become an MP? Then why don't you join Reform and try and become like a council and later on become like a politician for them? And he says, oh, no, I'm too introverted. So it just strikes me as he wants to have his take and eat it, where he just wants to run his mouth. Like he wants to, he wants to be seen as somehow being the crest of a wave, but also not take any of the risks. So he says with it. I just see him as being.
You don't join our sphere if you're trying to make money. That's for sure. It's just because there isn't any. There are a million things you could do on YouTube that will make you more money than doing right-wing politics.
You just do left-wing politics. I mean,
left-wing politics is much more lucrative for sure, but also I can see someone like Connor's a pretty young bloke. I believe he's about to get married, and so I can understand someone wanting a career, but that is probably going to compromise you if you want to be mainstream. It is.
But the trouble is, Iron Duke, and this may just be me, but I see this sort of commonality with these sorts of figures, like the turning point crowd. I call them like the turning point crowd, and in my mind, they're just like the, they're kind of like the what's the red fox? The fox in Pinocchio. What was it? Was Honest John or something like that, wasn't it? That's how I sort of view these sorts of. I mean, they're always trying to work an angle, and there's something off-putting about it. And don't get me wrong, I Stelios and people like that. I don't. There are people who I don't think he's one of those guys. I don't think Bo's one of those guys. I don't think Josh or people like that are one of those guys. But there are plenty of people like like the Calvin Robinson and people like that. It feels like they're just trying to work an angle. And
yeah, I mean, Calvin Robinson's
I don't trust them.
He's in the USA now, I believe. He's running a church in America somewhere.
Yeah, for all the talk of even lecturing me when I was interviewing him of like the how we must defend Christian civilization at home, and it's like, yeah, well, that lasted about literally 2 fucking seconds, didn't it?
Well, yeah, but all right, I'm going to defend him to a tiny degree, just to the tiny degree that
Go on. Yeah.
In Britain, it's the Church of England is a pretty dead organisation. I think the Anglicans in America are still a bit stronger, and it's probably a bit left wing, to be honest with you. We've lost Mitch, who's had to leave, but Mitch, thank you very much for joining us, mate. All right, before we finish this evening, what I wanted to do was just briefly talk about the Australian election, because I'm in Australia. What I think happened here was it was a combination of things. There was a certain amount of pushback from Trump because of tariffs and so on. But I don't think that was the major deal in Australia. I think the major deal in Australia was that the Liberal Party leader, who is the Australian equivalent of the British so-called Conservative Party, and they're equally wet. The truth is that the leader of the so-called Liberal Party ran a very lefty campaign. He was trying to chase minority votes in Australia, so like recent immigrants from India and what have you. He had several opportunities where he could have stood up on right-wing issues, and he didn't do it. He refused, and in fact, he lost his seat. The leader of the Liberal Party in Australia lost his seat. And so we've got Gay Albanese, who is still Prime Minister, unfortunately. But also, I've got to say this about Australia. The right of centre nationalist scene in Australia is not at all developed, really. The Australian right-wing nationalists tend to be a strange mixture of libertarians and neo-Nazis, for the most part, if I'm really being honest about it. And there aren't many relatively sensible right-wing nationalists, if you see what I mean.
I have noticed that you have them. The person who used to hang around. Is it Joel Davis who is in?
Yes.
He's the one. Why is it? I'm just interested in this, Andrew. Why is it in Australia that they are more attuned to like this, like the most radical position on
Couldn't tell you, mate.
things?
I couldn't tell you, to be honest.
Like more so than like in other English-speaking nations. I'm just curious because that's something I've noticed with Australia, and I just find that quite interesting. I'd like if you might know why.
I just look. I was on Tim Wilm's stream yesterday, very early on when he was covering the election results, Tim is a libertarian, but he's also a nationalist. Tim's a really good bloke. I like him. He's a genuine Australian nationalist. But the right in Australia is this strange mixture of more or less libertarians and as I say, a certain number of frankly neo-Nazi types, and I don't know why. I mean, one of the big issues in this election is supposedly price gouging by supermarkets. Like, Australia's only really got 2 massive supermarket chains, and people were claiming they're price gouging. I don't know if they are or not, to be honest with you. But, you know, the immigration, I mean, Tuma Verminius is saying that Dutton, the Liberal leader, could have won if he'd gone hard on immigration. Maybe, I'm not sure about that. But there were repeated times when Dutton could have stood up and said, you know, for example, when the British High Court came out with the decision that women are actual people who were born women and it doesn't include trans people, he refused to comment on that, basically, which was a mistake on his part, if you ask me. I didn't, talking to like average, ordinary, normie people, I didn't see a great deal of interest in this election, really, from most people. Also, you got to remember the Labour Party in Australia is not as lefty as the Labour Party in Britain is, although they're equally globalist. So yeah, I don't know. It's strange in Australia. I'll need to get Tim on at some stage to talk about this, because I do think it's quite an interesting issue. You know, the right in Australia.
I mean, it can't be a coincidence as well that, you know, the nominal Conservative Party of Australia, or the equivalent to the British Conservative Party in Australia, loses the election, and also the leader loses a seat. And also,
it was a disaster for the Liberals. It was a disastrous election campaign, but they didn't really campaign. They just tried not to say anything about anything, as far as I could see. You know?
Yeah.
And let me be clear, I didn't vote for them anyway. I voted One Nation. I always vote One Nation, basically. So, you know.
Oh, is that the
Pauline Hanson's party? Yes, the anti-immigration party, basically.
The anti-immigration One Nation.
Yeah, the anti-third world immigration party. Yeah, I voted One Nation, same as I always do, pretty much. I didn't really care that Dutton didn't win, because I thought Dutton would have been useless anyway, to be honest. I don't think it would have made a huge amount of difference if he had won. You know, the tax will be higher, energy costs will continue to increase in Australia. The cost of living here is pretty bad. The housing bubble in Australia is probably at least as bad and maybe worse than in Canada. You know, and your well-off boomers are desperate for their house prices not to go down, so they're not in favour of restricting immigration, because that's what keeps house prices going up, because Australian birth rates have been below replacement level for a while now. I do think that the Trump tariff thing had a little effect, but I don't think it was huge in Australia, to be honest. I saw people on X trying to say it was, and I don't think it was that big, really.
I think it. I mean, I think it definitely played like a major factor in Canada, for the Conservatives in Canada.
Oh yeah, there it did, but that's because it's right next door to America, you know. But in Australia, I think it had a small part, but not much, really. I think in Australia, it was more that the Liberals ran a very poor campaign.
Did the Australian Labour Party, what's his name, Albanese?
Albanese, yes.
Albanese, yeah. I mean, did he pull like a Mark Carney, where he said, we have a proud tradition of English, or he didn't pull that?
Not at all. No. Albanese basically didn't really campaign much, didn't confront any issues. tried to run a very safe campaign, and obviously did, because people voted for the devil they know rather than the devil they didn't know. But like I said, I don't think there was much enthusiasm in Australia for this election. I mean, obviously we have compulsory voting here, so you have to vote. Although the other thing that happens in Australia is you get a lot of spoiled ballots, because you can go to, as long as you go to the polling station, you can spoil your ballot and they can't find you. Whereas if you just don't go, they'll find you.
So I'm just looking at the current results here. So the Labour Party is up 9. The
Yep.
Liberal/National Coalition is down 19, including Dutton losing his seat. The Greens are down.
Also, AI, don't forget that in Australia we have a preference system. So you don't vote once, you vote like 6 times in descending order of who you want your votes to go to, if you vote like that. And some people don't. Some people will just vote as the Labour Party tells them, or as the Liberals tell them. But if you're sensible, you do your own stuff. But it still means that if you've got an area which, for example, has a Labour candidate and also a Greens candidate, in Australia we have these strange people called teals, and they're basically moronic middle class lefty women. That's what the teals are, basically. They're all middle class lefty women, sometimes lesbian, sometimes not. And those people and the Greens, the preferences will always go to Labour if that's going to win them the seat, if you see what I mean. It's a pretty complicated system down here, and it's not. This is one reason I'm never going to support proportional representation in Britain. I think it's a really bad idea. But anyway, although the Australian system is not even that, really, it's something else.
I mean, it does seem that Labour is sort of on the actual vote share, not about the seats, but like the vote share wise, because they're only up by what 1.9.
Yeah, the swings weren't big. You know, there was no huge swing against the Liberals. It was just the Liberals ran a really bad campaign.
I mean, it does look like the Green
was clueless.
I mean, it does look on the vote share, like the actual vote share. It looks like the Labour Party just gained among Green voters, the Centre Alliance, and what was it, Qatar's Australian? What's that? Qatar's Australian Party?
Yeah. He's fairly nationalist, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wasn't at all surprised. But like I said, I didn't see any great enthusiasm from anyone, like in terms of normie people, for this election. I don't think anyone gave a shit about it, really. You know.
There's also, what's it called, United Australia Party.
Yeah, there's a lot of little parties. You know, I mean, there's a legalized cannabis party that does really well. You know. When I say does really well for a party which is just a one-issue party, you know.
Yeah.
You got Summa Arminius, the same. That's what I did. I voted One Nation, but as you say, it doesn't make that much difference, really. But yeah, so yeah, the Australian election was a pretty big nothing burger, if you ask me.
Oh, it looks like you got what's the Australia's Voice, and it's led by Fatima Payman.
Yes.
Fatima
and of course
Payman.
Yeah, and the Liberals had plenty of Indian candidates and stuff like that. And as I said, Dutton, the Liberal leader who lost his seat, actually spent quite a lot of time trying to chase Indian votes and so on. I mean, which didn't do him any good at all.
But she wasn't even born in Australia. She was born in Afghanistan under the I mean, she's the same age as me, near enough.
Yep.
She's born in Afghanistan under the Taliban rule. So
I can't remember if it was a Labour guy or a Liberal guy, and it could have been either, who actually argued that everyone's Australian, even if they've only been here 6 days, apparently. So, you know, whatever. It's the typical globalist bullshit, basically. And Australia
mean,
is, as Stream of Arminius is saying, Australia is trying to import more Indians, which I think is a big mistake. But there you go.
does that? I mean, would the Japanese pilots flying over Darwin, would they become Australian because they were like
Well,
hovering over the land? Or if they
presumably, if
crashed.
they landed and spent 6 days there, if they were shot down and they were here for 6 days,
Yeah, they were shot down. Sorry, Tojo, you're an Aussie now, mate. Sorry,
that's
Tojo.
it, mate. Don't be a bludger, mate. But anyway, I just the Australian elections, it was predicted before the election that Labour were going to hang on, and but if you go and look at the ABC, which is like the Australian equivalent of the BBC and just as lefty and vile, you can go and see the swings were not enormous anywhere. There was no great feeling of oh yeah, we really like Albanese. That wasn't most people's feeling at all.
Well, in the House, Labour haven't gained or lost any. It's only the coalition, the Liberal, have lost 5. In the Senate so far, Labour, the Liberals, and the Greens have all lost seats to, a couple of independents, People First, and Australian Voice.
Yeah.
They've lost it to like other like smaller left wing or like centre right parties.
People say, and were certainly saying 2 or 3 years ago, that the right in Britain wasn't organised, but it's a hell of a lot more organised than it is in Australia at the moment, I've got to tell you. So, I mean, whether you regard reform as being on the right or not, because at the moment I don't really, but we'll see. I live in hopes. All right, guys, before we close, Aaron, is there anything you would like to plug in terms of like your channel and what have you?
Yes, yesterday I did a live stream. Duke referred to it before, about the local election results. Duke was a guest, as was Mitch, and also my friend Raz. So that's up on my channel. And also I will be doing a live stream. It's coming Tuesday about BookTube and politics. For those who don't know, BookTube is the nickname for the area of YouTube that reviews books. So I'll be just discussing the sort of the way that BookTubers generally talk about politics as opposed to the reality of it. So if anybody's interested in that, you're more welcome.
And that's, your channel is Aaron James Hook, isn't it?
Yeah, Aaron James Hook, yeah.
Okay, well, there'll be details of Aaron's channel under the stream in a bit. Go and check Aaron's channel out. He's got a really good channel. He does a lot of literary reviews and also sometimes film reviews and this kind of stuff. Yeah.
I'll just say that. I'm just going to say, I'll just decide the live stream on Tuesday is at 7 p.m. British time.
Cool, man. I shall look forward to it. AI, is there anything you'd like to plug? And I know you've got a really interesting stream coming up on the Marquis de Sade.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I've got a stream coming out on Monday. It's the Politics of Oblivion, the Elder Scrolls game remastered, and with Hitman. So that'd be a fun one. That's a light-hearted one. Until we actually get to the more like the more important one, which is a bet, because I set myself up about a month ago saying that if I can't get 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, then I will do like a live reading of 120 Days of Sodom by Marquis de Sade. And I lost the bet. I didn't get anywhere near 1,000. I'm still like 300 subs off. I guess all of you guys in chat want me to do this, so I'm going to do it. And to be honest,
that's why, AI. I mean, I'm just going to be fascinated to see you covering this, to be honest with you. It's a vile book, but anyway.
I mean, I am thinking this probably will nuke my channel. This might be the end of the channel anyway.
You're going to have to be quite careful how you talk about things in terms of YouTube's policies, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I do know there's one part of the book, which I know YouTube doesn't look very kindly on. So I'm going to it's gonna be a difficult one. And to be honest, I know like Aaron and Aubrey and yourself have been sort of putting memes in chat. I'm gonna have to do it. If I do like a part one or something, it's gonna have to split up. So it's gonna be like multiple parts to it. Luckily, I'm by myself in the house on Friday when I do this. I'm gonna have to do it like when there's nobody about, because there's no context. There's no context to this book. If someone could overhear it, there's no context I can justify. I can sort of justify myself, because it is like just pure depravity. But in many ways, it is a good thing, as somebody said. It actually does highlight like this is like the end. We talk like the end state of liberalism, and this is kind of like the worst. This is like the worst aspect of liberalism right here that we'll be going into like French liberal ideas and what have you. So
yeah, he was a revolutionary judge for a while, and apparently by no means the worst one. Like, he didn't send all that many people to the guillotine in his favor, but
yeah, he wasn't the worst. But it's just
someone
it's a shame.
in the chat, by the way, was asking, did we discuss the Australian election yet? Yeah, mate, you came on like literally after we just stopped discussing it.
Yeah.
So if you go back about 30 minutes, you can hear us talking about it. Sorry, carry on, AR.
Yeah, so people can come into live chat, and I'd recommend coming into live chat just in case it does, like, if it is removed or something. I wouldn't be surprised if there's like a age restriction put on it, and there's a whole bunch
Well,
of
your channel, I hope your channel is marked as for adults anyway, isn't it? Because that's the only thing you can do.
I believe it is, but
you should double check that. But
as I say,
you're still going to have to phrase it very carefully.
well, I mean, I did say in the bet that I would read it, word for word. I did declare publicly.
You can't do that. If you do that, they will nuke your channel, I guarantee you. I was unfortunate enough to I haven't read all that book because some bits of it were so disgusting I skipped them. But I've read most of it like donkey's years ago. And yeah, it's very unpleasant. Very unpleasant. But yeah,
I mean,
so your channel is what, AI?
It's actually, that's a good question. What is my channel?
AI Shire Homeland, is it now?
Yeah, Shire Homelander. That's it. It'll be on there. So come check us out on Monday and on Friday. I might do a video or do a video sort of in between as well on a sort of another issue. But I mean, yeah, on the whole, I'm sort of preparing myself for that Friday one, and as I say, it's probably going to be it's going to be maybe like a 2-3 parter one. I'm afraid, everybody. So it's gonna dominate. It's gonna dominate.
It'll be interesting anyway. It'll be interesting.
Yeah.
I'll say that. All right, guys. Thank you very much to my guests this evening. Obviously, Aaron Hook and AI, but also Adam and Mitch, who had to leave a little bit early. As always, I'm going to play us out with a tune. Let me make sure I do this properly. we go. Okay, let's see if we can do this, shall we? There we go. Okay, guys, I don't know what went on there. I'm sorry. I was trying to play Plymouth Hoe, which is about Drake playing his game of bowls and then going and defeating the Spanish Armada from Patriotic Archive, which is a good channel. Go and check it out. Thanks for joining us, to my guests and to the audience, and don't let the bastards grind you down. We will see you on Wednesday for our history stream. Go on.